we've got all stars here today. Fantastic. Hey, listen, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for listening to the speech. We've actually got a plane to catch, all four of us, to get back down to Wellington, so we'll take a few quick questions, but I'll let you shoot.
Can we talk about the operating allowance? You said that's been reduced from $2.4 billion down by $300 million. Where's that savings coming from?
Look, we'll detail all of that in the budget with a specific detail, but as you know, we've been working really assiduously to move money from the back office to the frontline services, and that's been redirecting the money that we're spending. And some good examples. It's not always just about the quantity of money you're spending, it's about how you spend that money that matters, and that's what we've been doing, is doing so more efficiently. And so again, it's a relentless drive we have, as I said, daily practice, make sure every taxpayer dollar is being spent more, that we're getting more from it, and that's what we've been focused on.
But the scale
Sorry, Katie. I'll just go.
Does the government departments on notice then that they can expect that they are going to have to find savings? There may be job losses, programs.
Well, we made that expectation crystal clear from day one.
Even further going
Yeah, but it's just the way we roll, which is every day I expect, as I would in any other enterprise across New Zealand, that actually every dollar is being deployed optimally. I mean, a good example for us is that an average cost of a classroom in New Zealand is $1.2 million when we came to power. We've made those buildings standardised increasingly, and we've actually halved the cost. Now we can do twice as many classrooms out there in New Zealand by being smarter and being better managers of that money. So it's not just the quantum of money, it's what you do with it and how you deploy it that's important. Rebecca?
So
I'll come to you, Amelia. Yeah.
I've actually got a question on a different
Yeah.
topic. Migration numbers are out tomorrow, the new ones. Do you know what they are? Have you had a heads up at all?
I haven't seen the new numbers. What I just reassure New Zealanders about, because there's been a lot of conversations about Kiwis leaving, but in the last 12 months we've had an 18% growth in Kiwis coming home. The month in February was less Kiwis leaving than we've seen, I think, since 2022. But again, the way that immigration works in New Zealand is that it's got to be linked to our economic strategy and our infrastructure capacity.
Yeah, so in terms of that and getting Kiwis back here, are you thinking about any incentives to bring them back?
Well, as we've been seeing over the last 12 months, they are saying that I might go to Australia. I find out that house prices are really expensive. Yes, I have to go pay a stamp duty. Yes, I'm living in an economy with a higher level of inflation, often a lot more competition for jobs, and it's not quite as good as what they thought they were. So, they are choosing to come home on their own volition because they see we're building a better economy.
John said to Bloomberg, he said that incentives, that he would put incentives in place, that he would put tax incentives that for workers earlier in their career, or big incentives to bring big projects here. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's not something we've considered at this point in time. Our job fundamentally is to build an economy where people feel they can work hard and get ahead. They are safe, and most importantly, they've got good health and education.
Are you going to be borrowing extra for that increased capital allocation that you just talked about?
Well, again, we'll talk about all of that in the budget, but as I've said to you very clearly, we recommitted to being in surplus in 2028, 2029. We're making sure that we get debt under 40% of GDP, and those are non-negotiables for us. Sorry, Amelia.
Yeah, you made a point of immigration in there. Why did you decide to focus on that? I know that obviously your coalition partners are deciding to focus on immigration, but for New Zealanders, we know it's not a big issue for them through Ipsos. So why have you chosen to steer into that debate?
All I was talking about was, one of the four components of how we build better national security for New Zealand as a collective is social cohesion. When you look at what are the drivers around the world, around what's driving lower levels of social cohesion and trust in institutions, a lot of it's coming back from immigration, globalisation, technology disruption, pandemics, obviously dealing with inflation and recessions, and that's been driving a whole bunch of angst all around the world. In the context of immigration, the point I was trying to make is that we are a country that should be very proud of our immigrant community, but equally the reason it works in New Zealand, unlike it does in other countries, is because we have a smart, targeted and fair system, and we must always make sure that we're doing exactly that. So I've heard the comments from political parties. We don't have mass illegal immigration in this country. It's not like Farage and railing against it in the UK, or Pauline Hanson in Australia, or other countries that we're dealing with. We have legal migration, but we have also, it requires a dynamic approach where you are constantly making sure those settings are optimised and are linked to our economic strategy and our infrastructure.
Just on the immigration, you mentioned some Kiwis being unfairly vilified. Who are you talking about there? Who's unfairly vilified?
Well, I've seen comments from different politicians over the course of recent months to say, yeah, they may well be, and I've called them out for that because I don't think those are helpful comments. We saw an Indian FTA conversation get perverted into a conversation about a fear of mass migration to New Zealand. That is just factually incorrect, and it's wrong. So I wanted to correct the record, and I don't think it's right. These are Kiwis who have left everything they know, chosen to come to this country. They work incredibly hard. They send their kids to school. They don't go on welfare, and they are fantastic Kiwis, and they've made a great contribution. But the system works where it doesn't in many other countries is because we have a very smart, targeted, fair immigration system that we constantly dynamically adjust so that it's linked to our economic strategy and our infrastructure.
The partial sale of Kiwi Bank?
No, but I'll let Simeon Brown, who's the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, say a few words on that for you.
No, what we've done is we've set a letter of expectation, which is we want them to compete vigorously with the Australian counterparts to make sure we have a more competitive banking sector in New Zealand. We have the capital requirements that the Reserve Bank has changed, allows them to grow, and we expect them to grow, we expect them to compete, so we have more competitive banking here in New Zealand.
So are you interested in the...
Well, look, we went through a process last year. What came from that process was actually the capital requirements that the Reserve Bank set no longer mean us having to continue with that process at this stage. What we're focusing Kiwi Bank on now is growing as quickly as they can, being a vigorous competitor in the market, to make sure New Zealand has a more competitive banking setting, particularly against the big four. That's what we want them to be doing.
Fast enough on that? Is that what that message is
No,
about?
our expectation about being very clear with them, we want them to grow. The capital requirements allow them to do that. We expect them to be competing against the big four, so we have more competitive banking here in New Zealand. Ultimately, that drives lower costs for New Zealand households and businesses.
Winston Peters says he'll never support the partial selling of Kiwi Bank. Will you reconcile it?
Well, again, we're not saying that, so let's be clear. You've just heard from the Minister saying, there was a capital raise proposal put together last year. There was a change from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand's capital rules for all banks across the country, and as a determination, Kiwi Bank said, hey, listen, that's giving us and freeing us up in a way that we can actually grow this business. The Minister's doing the right thing by actually setting a letter of expectations that we expect performance from Crown entities, and after 6 years of sort of being in stasis and not held and pushed to account, he's done a very good job of saying, hang on, we expect Kiwi Bank to grow. We want you to come on and challenge the Australian banks and to get a more competitive borrowing in place and therefore lower the cost of living for New Zealanders.
In your speech, you talked about divisive politics. Can you assure that that any coalition clashes can be ruled out ahead of this budget?
So I'm really interested to make the point, and I think if you take the thesis of my speech, it was acknowledging that where we sit in the world today, the world is changing around us. And my speech was about how, in that context, does New Zealand actually secure its own future. What I said to you is that we need to start at home, we need to control what we're doing at home, build more national security in its fullest sense. That requires social cohesion, it requires fiscal, financial stability, energy independence, and those are important components of what we've got to work on in the years ahead. This country has a fantastic future, but we've got to build a stronger homeland here in New Zealand. That's what we're going to do.
Is it going to be a wide president has moved to Australia every year? Should we be doing more to keep them here or to bring them back? It affects many families in Auckland, it affects many families right across the country.
Yeah, so Rebecca, as I just said, we've had an 18% growth in Kiwis coming back in the last year. Many of them, as you know, go to Australia, many of them coming back from Australia and other parts of the world. But isn't it great?
600,000 are in Australia.
Sure, and there's been always a large diaspora in Australia, but isn't it fantastic? Isn't it great? And we should be celebrating the fact that we've had an 18% growth in Kiwis coming home, and we've had less New Zealanders leave in the last month of February than what we've seen since 2022. And I think that's it. Oh, absolutely, but that's part of what we're doing. We are rebuilding the economy, so if you work hard, you can get ahead. We're making sure that it's safe. We're making sure that you can actually have good access to health and education.